Grid. Guess what? Today I've got Kyle Stanley from Fresno, California to talk to us about Airbnbs, right? And when I went online and started doing a little bit of research on you, Kyle, I was like, man, this guy is like really built a big thing in a pretty fast time, right? And so what I'd love to do is learn a little bit about what your business looks like today, but then I want to go back in time after that, right? So talk to me a little bit about your Airbnb business today. What does it look like?
Yeah. Long story short, we're in 3 different markets: Fresno, Bass Lake, which is just outside of Fresno, and then Phoenix and Scottsdale, Arizona. We have right around 65 properties, listings on Airbnb or VRBO or our direct booking website. And we are doing it in a fashion where we don't own the property. So I think 7 of my 65 doors I own myself, and the rest I'm either doing essentially what we call the arbitrage model, where I lease it and then sublease it, keep all the profits. And that's with the permission of the landlord. Or I actually work with the landlord and I manage for them, and we take a percentage of whatever we produce for that landlord. And so that's about 45-ish of our properties. So that's the majority. And that's where I've found that this business can really grow the fastest. And yeah, what that comes down to in terms of dollars and numbers is after expenses. Typically in my pocket, you're looking at right around $40,000 a month, and to the companies, right around the $55,000 to $60,000 mark.
Dude, that's awesome. That's phenomenal. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions and kind of break some of that down. But what I want to do is I want to go back in time, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back and figure out, how did you even get onto this like real estate train, this journey, right? Have you always been interested in real estate, or like tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah. I mean, I could turn this into a 20-minute story with a bunch of teachings, but I'll respect the time. I grew up in a family where my dad was a business owner. And if you've ever read the E-Myth, he was definitely the technician. You know, he was there. He essentially owned a job. And he had time off during the summer because it was in the education business. But long story short, I just kind of ingrained that in myself, but I fought it in the beginning. I wanted to be a sports anchor. So I jumped into sports anchoring. I was a local TV sports anchor in Grand Junction, Colorado for a couple of years. It didn't take me very long, Rob. After about 6 months, I was like, okay, I don't like taking orders from other people. I don't feel like I have the opportunity to have creative freedom. I don't like being told what my time is worth. So very early on, at the age of 22, I found out that I did not want to be a 9-to-5 employee. And so I actually started in my own business, and that was helping athletes get recruited to play in college. I was making videos for them. I was connecting them with college coaches. And you know what? It was an amazing idea, and it was an amazing opportunity, but I had zero mentorship. I had zero path. I didn't have the guidance. And so I just kept on justifying it, Rob, by telling myself, well, you know what? I'd much rather work 80 hours per week for myself than 40 hours per week for someone else. And in the background, I was maybe making $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Maybe.
How did you even get that idea? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, great question. It was actually on a vacation with my parents. My mom, was asking me, "Are you enjoying your job as a sports anchor?" And I was like, "Eh." And she actually said, "Well, have you ever thought about just like doing something on the side?" And I was like, "Yeah, but like, what would I do?" And she said, "Well, you're already filming all these athletes. Why don't you just try to sell some video to them?" I was like, "That's an amazing idea." So that's what kind of started it. The problem with that business was that I created unknowingly, I created a ceiling. I wanted to, I'm all about fulfillment. I still am today. But when I was promising the world, I didn't realize what I was doing was not scalable. And so long story short, after getting a few clients, I'm like, I don't even have time to go out and get new clients. And so that was something I learned very early on. And then at the age of 26, I heard about this term passive income for the first time in my life. And I was like, what's that? What do you mean you can make money in your sleep? That's never been modeled for me before. I've never seen that before. I don't think that's possible. And it was in the version of, a multi-level marketing company that I decided to go and, work with them. And honestly, a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about MLMs. I attribute most of my desire to want to grow as a human being to the fact that I got around high level people in these MLMs. Were all of them making $1 million a year? No. Were some of them making, $4 million a year? Yeah, absolutely. But the majority of them were just amazing people and leaders that I was able to say, okay, here's how I become a better human being. And by doing so, I'm going to attract better things in my life, which to me is, even if it wasn't that income of the MLM, I was eventually going to attract something into my life that was going to be that thing. And so, Rob, this, I mean, I'm kind of skipping over a lot of this, but this is really the first about 9 years out of college, from the time I was 22 to the time I was 31. But in 2018, 2017, I moved back to Fresno from Scottsdale, where I lived for about 4 years. And the reason was because my dad got bone cancer. And, that's a death sentence for anyone. Essentially, it wasn't about, was he going to live? It was about, when is he going to pass away? And so in 2017, I moved back. In 2018, he's basically in hospice, at home hospice. And I had to tell my entire multi-level marketing team, like, hey, I'm not able to focus on anything except for family right now. And overnight, this, passive income pretty much like vanished. And I was just like, wow, this is not stable. This isn't a good foundation. I've built this thing for the last 4 years, but it just disappeared what felt like overnight.
Yeah. When the leader wasn't there, it just didn't happen.
Exactly.
It fell apart.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's necessarily MLMs. I think that's a lot of businesses, right?
Yeah. For sure.
The leader just leaves, there's just no guidance. And so I did a lot of soul searching, and I had a lot of time at that point because, I was at home and there wasn't much to do except for help my mom and dad when he needed anything. So I was just listening to podcasts, reading books. Couple things keep popping up about apartment complexes. And I'm like, that sounds great, but I can't afford them. So how do I go and get them? And then this one day, a Fortune Builders ad pops up on my Facebook. And that, if you guys don't know what that is, wholesaling and flipping houses. And I went to their free event in town, and January 6th, 2019, I was all in, and I was like, I'm going to flip houses. I'm going to wholesale. And the reason I remember the date is it was a really significant day. I dropped a lot of money to jump into it. When you drop that much money, that skin in the game, that becomes really significant.
Gets cemented in your brain.
Oh, 100%. And
how much? I'm just curious. How much did you drop? How much did you drop at the time?
30,000.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of money, man.
Yeah, and I was like one of the lower level people in that room. There was people dropping $70,000. I was like, no, there's no way.
I remember. I mean, just this is an aside, but I mean, this must have been a decade ago or more. I flew to San Diego.
Yeah.
With my business partner for Fortune Builders, and I remember, they do a great job of presenting everything. And at the end, they bring you out that sheet, and it's like 10 grand, 30 grand, 70. I'm like, it's just a ton of money. Right.
Yeah.
But it is an investment, right? Like that's how you have to look. And I'm sure that's how you justified it. You're like, listen, this is an investment in my education.
Yeah. I mean, the way I looked at it is, if I did one deal, I could essentially pay for the entire thing back.
Yeah.
And that's when I created my education system. That's kind of what I decided too, is I felt like the level of entry was not about how much was I spending. It was how quickly could I get that money back. And so that's how I justified the 30,000 I dropped. And just, so the reason I remember January 6th as well is 11 days later is when my dad passed. And it was also legitimately like the day before I was starting a brand new full-time job. I wasn't expecting to get into flipping and wholesaling. I thought I was going to go get a full-time job, start saving money, put it into single family homes or apartments, create passive income, and do this for the next 30 to 40 years. That's legitimately like what I thought. But then when I saw wholesaling and flipping, I was like, okay, I can accelerate that. I can go faster. And again, starting a brand new job the next day, and then my dad passing away about 10 days later, it was a very crazy time in my life. But
how old were you, by the way?
With that being in 2019, I would have been 31, 32. Around there. Yeah. Okay. Don't let the gray beard throw you off.
Are you married? Do you have kids?
Getting married May 7th.
Okay. Well, congrats.
Yeah.
Okay. It's coming up.
Yeah, exactly. In Cabo, we're counting down the days right now.
Okay.
But yeah, so, I sign up for this January 6th. I get my first deal under contract middle of February. It was a quick flip. I just wanted to get the experience. I didn't care about what I made. I just wanted to get the experience. Made like $7,000 or something like that. I can't remember. But it got me in the game. And that led me to, and I promise I'm getting to Airbnb here, but that led me to my second deal, which was going to be a long-term rental. I found it. I was going to burr it, and the numbers worked out great. And I was like, wait a second. I've been doing Airbnb. By the way, I've been doing Airbnb as a room out of my house for the last 3 years. That's all I ever saw of it. Cool. Easy way to house hack, maybe bring in a little bit extra income, pay for the mortgage. And I was like, but what if I were to instead, do this as a short-term rental? What would those numbers look like? Kind of did an ARV on a short-term rental versus a long-term rental. And I was coming up with about 2.5 to 3 times the amount of net income as I would with a long-term rental, $600 versus about $2,000. It's like, this feels good. This feels like acceleration. I think I can move this a little bit faster than, getting 7, long-term or 70 long-term rentals over the next 50 years,
Yeah.
And so everyone said I was crazy. It's Fresno, California. Who in the world wants to come to Fresno, California? Because everyone was in the mindset of vacation rentals. This isn't a vacation rental. This is short-term rentals. Families, businesses, people coming in for family reunions, coming in because, maybe a week because their house got flooded and they got to move into a different place for a week. These are the reasons that people go and do this. And it came to fruition. The first month I made right around $1,800 and I was off and running. And of course that just takes you down the rabbit hole. You just want to learn more. And I found out about this opportunity to do Airbnb and short-term rentals without owning the property. And Rob, that was the light bulb moment. And so as soon as I saw that, I needed proof of concept. I went for it, talked to a few landlords, got a yes, was making $800 a month on a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment for my very first one, and just went all in. So,
okay, well, let me take a step back, right?
Yeah,
real fast. So, you had to go approach some landlords, right? Step number 1, you're like, okay, this works. This worked for me. So let me go approach some landlords. Where did you find those landlords? Were the people that you knew? Did you go on Craigslist? Did you find somebody on the MLS? How did you start that conversation?
Great question. So I actually, because I wanted to build up confidence, I started with leasing agents at apartments because I knew that it was their job to sell leases. Like if they didn't sell leases, then they're not getting paid that bonus or they're, not keeping their job. So I also knew that they were going to have a set of rules. So I was fully walking in there with the expectation of they probably can't, but at least I can get my practice, and they're probably going to have some objections. I don't really know what those objections are going to be. Let me just go ahead and try this out. And so I just kind of it's like going to the baseball cages and just getting your hacks in, getting your swings and just trying, fully expecting to get no's. Got one yes after about the 15th apartment complex that I went to.
Wow. Okay.
And then because I got that proof of concept, then I said, okay, now let's try landlords. The third landlord I talked to said yes. And that was from Craigslist. And they were, they lived in the Bay. They were only in town for the weekend. They needed someone right away. They were in an urgent mode. And I went over there, pitched, and the next day they were calling me saying, this feels a lot better than just renting to a regular tenant. I think I'm going to go for it. And had that same property up until about 6 months ago when it just wasn't performing. So I actually went ahead and offloaded that to another colleague here in town.
Okay. So fascinating. Okay. So you said, okay, this works, right? So you then decided to just go all out. Like, what was your metric? Like, what are some of the metrics that you were looking for, right? I would assume if I'm doing this, I'm thinking, okay, how many landlords can I talk to? Out of these amount of landlords, I'm going to get X amount. They're going to say yes. Out of that, I know that I need, there's probably a landlord avatar that eventually you end up landing on. Like, these kind of landlords with these kind of properties are the target markets that I would go after. right? Like, what did you discover in that whole process, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I discovered even before going into the metrics was that just by doing it, you learn exactly what you do want and what you don't want. And so what I learned really quickly was, even though it was a low barrier of entry, right? A 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house with furnishing, first month's rent, security deposit, plus consumables. I might be low end $7,000 all in, high end $15,000 in. It's a low barrier of entry. But at the same time, if let's say I got $100,000 in the bank, which would be a nice luxury to have, I didn't at the time, but let's just call it that. If I invest 15,000 and now I'm making, call it $2,000 a month, it's still going to take me about 7 or 8 months to get all that money back. And I wanted to move fast. So the first 3 that I got, I would say, just so to answer your question, I was looking for landlords on Craigslist, on Facebook Marketplace, on Zillow, on hot pads that honestly, they just wanted peace of mind and they wanted to make a little bit more than they were currently making. And so I was able to provide them with peace of mind because, hey, you don't have to worry about getting this property 2 years later and wondering, wow, what in the world happened to this thing? Like, I've got turnovers happening 2 or 3 times a week. If you live in town, you want to come take a look, see if it's in good condition, I'll give you that opportunity. And just by giving them that peace of mind, none of them actually ever came and took a look. They just were like, okay, cool. It's nice to have that opportunity. So another reason they wanted peace of mind is most people that own a investment house here in Fresno don't live in Fresno. They live in Southern California or they live in the Bay Area. And so I was able to essentially, quote unquote, be like a free property manager for them because I had the team. I had the contractors. I had the handymen. I had the cleaners. I had the electricians, the HVAC, the plumbing. I had all that. And so they didn't have to worry about taking calls from guests or from tenants saying, hey, here's the issue. So they could go and do their full-time job as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a teacher, and not have to worry about taking a phone call in the middle of the day. So those are the people that I wanted to help. And then at the end of the day, if they still were like, well, it feels a little riskier, I would say, okay, how about an extra $100, an extra $200 in rent? I'm going to make $2,000 a month on this thing. So what's an extra $100 or $200 out of my pocket? Doesn't feel too tough.
That's interesting because you're giving them, I now see it clearly, right? Because this is, I don't know anything about this space, but I now see, I own a lot of rentals. So I see it very clearly now in my head, right? I'm like, okay, you're giving them guaranteed rent.
Yeah.
Right. So there's some level of guarantee. Are you paying them in advance, like months in advance? Or are you doing it month to month? Like, what does that look like?
It's a case by case.
Case by case. Okay.
Yeah. So I've had owners where we just pay the extra every month. And I've had owners where I'm like, okay, we'll pay the same amount of rent for you as a regular tenant, but we'll give you 3 months upfront, or we'll give you 4 months upfront, just as a sign of good faith that, we're all in.
So you're giving them guaranteed, right? There's a peace of mind that like these properties are getting turned over. And I believe like even in the platform, like you can rate guests, right? Like guests can get, like if guests are destroying your house, like they could get a bad rating and not be able to be on the platform. So there's a certain level of accountability that happens with that.
Yeah. 100%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
so one of my students said to me the other day, he was like, and it was the day that he got his first yes, by the way, too. And this is legitimately, if you see this vision, like we are the best option for a landlord because
100%.
we treat that place like our own business. It becomes our own baby. Find me one tenant that is going to treat a house that they're renting like their own baby. It's just not going to happen.
Totally see the vision.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally see that. So, okay. So you, how long did it take you to get to 65? I'm curious.
We got to 65 pretty much about a month ago. So just under 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah. But what I'll tell you is, the beginning and kind of what I was getting at there was in the beginning, we were arbitraging. I actually went and owned a couple. I ran out of money. Even though I was making money, it was like, okay, if I got to wait 3 months to go get another property, I got a problem. I could go raise money. Do I really want to start involving partners and all those legal contracts? I could start using Amazon credit cards and put it on the credit card, 0% interest for the next 12 months. Yeah, that's great, but I can only do that so many times. So I got to this point where I was like, all right, what if I were to be able to have an owner actually furnish the entire thing, pay for all of the, just like a property manager, they are financially responsible. The owner is financially responsible to everything. I just take a little bit off the top as a manager. And I talked to a couple people like that, and they were down to try it. And that's where I ended up finding out this is actually a thing. It's called co-hosting, and it's essentially hospitality management. I go in, I help make the place Airbnb ready for a fee, and then we take a percentage off the top of the gross revenue collected every single month, 20 to 25%. And suddenly I got rid of my roadblock of not having enough money, because people were literally going out and buying houses so that they could bring them to me and I could manage them. And that's where this thing caught fire. Now I've got realtors and property managers and real estate investors blowing up my phone saying, hey, I'm thinking about short-term rentals, or I got a client that's thinking about short-term rentals. Can I send them your way? What would they make as a long-term rental versus a short-term rental? And we were able to show them, even after paying me, that they could make, after their expenses, their net income could be still an additional, call it 2.5 to 3 times the amount that they would make as a regular rental. And
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, super attractive to these people. And for that reason, you make one person, if they're supposed to make $300 and suddenly you make them $1,500, they're
your raving fan, man. They love you. You're their best friend, right? Yeah. So, are you only doing it in the Fresno area, or did you is that what are some of the limitations? Is it fit? I would imagine you would have to be is this scalable beyond your barriers, I guess is my question.
Yeah, right? Great question. So Fresno, for the first about 20 properties, we started to bleed into Bass Lake, which is about an hour from Fresno. And then we started a new branch in Scottsdale and Phoenix back in January of 21. What I suggest is start deep and then expand wide. If you can think about it, every time I start in a new market, I'm essentially starting a new business. Yeah. And it takes me about 6 months to automate that business. I have to be able to create the income to be able to pay really good people to take it over for me. And B, I need time to be able to find who are my A-team players. I got cleaners, I got vendors, I got runners, I've got quality control managers, I've got, the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical. I need to find all those people who are going to be good and say, Kyle, you're going to be the first phone call that I take, so that when I do have that teammate that essentially replaces me and becomes the Kyle clone, I can say, okay, I've created a great relationship with you guys. Now you're going to go talk to, Kyle's clone, and that's going to be the person that takes care of that entire place. So that's kind of how we've done it, is we've just created, automated, scaled. And now, the opposite of that business I told you about in the beginning, where I was a multi-level marketing and I left and it crumbled. Now we've created businesses with strong foundations that even if I leave, we're still getting leads calling us. We're still growing. We're still, and the systems are all being put into place and everything is refined because we've built it up in a really great way.
That's interesting. I mean, you could franchise that model if you wanted to, or you could have, co-ownership of in other markets for that model. We've expanded our real estate teams that way.
Thanks.
So that's fascinating. That's awesome, man. Okay. So I see that. To take a step back, there was one thing that you said. So it sounds like the landlord themselves, they're putting up all the money for all the furniture. So you're not constrained by that anymore. You're just going to say, hey, this is the kind of furniture that we need. I assume you probably tell them what's needed, or maybe you even create a list and say, hey, this is what you need to buy. They're supplying it. And now you more than likely have case studies that you could just show people, like case study 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And you kind of nailed it right there. When we have a really great performing property, we just literally send it to that owner and say, just try to make it like this. But a lot of owners also, I mean, if you think about most real estate investors, right? They're really good visionaries, but they're not always the best implementers. And so they would much rather just pay people to do it for them. So we have an interior designer that we started with, and that's where I tell everyone to start. every day that you're not live on Airbnb, you're losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for, even if you're doing it for someone else, you need to be making the money as quickly as possible. So it might make sense to pay the extra $4,000, $5,000 in labor to get it up on Airbnb as quickly as possible by hiring an interior designer. And then at that point, once we really started to scale, we said, how can we now create that as another revenue source for our business? And now we have basically in-house interior design. And you can thank my my soon-to-be wife for that. She is our interior designer.
That's awesome. No, I totally see that. It's an add-on, right?
Yeah.
An upsell. Be like, listen, you can do it yourself, or you can get hours to do it for you. Here's the additional cost to make that happen.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Very cool. So what are the constraints? What are the bottlenecks? What are the challenges in this kind of business?
Cleaners and good people. So one of the number one things I hear people talk about is, yeah, Airbnb is great income, but it's a lot of work. Well, those are the people that they're both the CEO and the janitor of their business. Whether they have 1 listing or 10 listings, they're typically doing everything themselves. They're going to the properties, they're checking on the cleaners. Maybe they're even cleaning sometimes. They're doing inventory checks. They're, purchasing for all those things that need to be replaced. They're communicating with the guests. They're doing the pricing. Like, all of that stuff needs to either be replaced with technology or, again, a good teammate. And so I find that 90% of the communication and the back end work can be automated through a couple technologies. So number one, we use Price Labs. Price Labs is dynamic pricing, which if you've ever gone to book a flight, you probably have noticed, hey, when I try to book on Monday, it's $300, but when I try to book on Saturday, it's like $350. Why is it changing in price? Well, because of supply and demand. And that's what dynamic pricing is. So it'll literally automate your entire process of pricing. It'll help you get more bookings, get higher prices. And if you think about it, what about that festival every year in your town that you just didn't think of or you forgot about? And that's getting booked out like crazy. And you lost out on an extra $100 per night because you were trying to manually price. With Price Labs and a dynamic pricing tool, it'll do that for you. So that saves, especially as you scale, that just saves you so much time and headache. And then the other side of it is hospitable, which I really like. Used to be called Smart B&B, where you can just essentially set up all of these automated responses to specific situations so that you're not having to manually go in there. And especially if you want freedom in this business, like, how annoying would that be to have to be checking your phone, while you're at dinner on a date night with your wife? No, we don't want to do that. We want to have it doing it on its own. And then as you scale and get bigger, virtual assistants become a big part of this as well. So that if that 10% that's not able to be answered through an automated messaging system, that 10% is able to be taken on by a virtual assistant.
Man, I love that.
Yeah.
We own a property management company. And so I'm gonna be passing this info on to Thomas, who really runs that business. He's the CEO of that business. He's gonna love this. He's gonna love this episode. So much for us to learn on.
I mean, legitimately, and okay, so let's talk about that for a second, Rob. So as a property manager, you get one property. What, 10%? Is that what you're getting?
Man, I wish 8%.
8%. Okay.
8%.
What's a typical rent?
$2,000.
Okay, so you're gonna make $160 for a place that's making $2,000. Now, I'm approaching this from 2 different ways. What if instead you're getting 3 times the rent, which is not unheard of? Most short-term rentals are going to get 2.5 to 3 times the amount of rent. So now you're talking about $5,500 to $6,000, but you're making 20% on that instead. Now you're making $1,200, and of course that's before some of your costs, which overhead might be $250, $300 at most. So you've just literally 8x your income. If you can create some systems in-house, then you've got an opportunity to be able to, again, the word I love is acceleration. Instead of me having to go out and get more properties, I can just accelerate my income and speed up my time to my eventual income goal.
Is that operating cost, like virtual assistants, the technology that you have, like the hospitable, like that just kind of fractionally, like you kind of calculate that, you'll say, hey, it's about 25%.
Yeah. For us, our hard costs for running a listing is $350. And the way that we got to that is just a combination of the average of our virtual assistant costs, our employee costs, our maybe losses that we might have just from oversights, technology, and I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, but that's the majority of it. But in the beginning, you really don't have those overhead costs in the beginning because you're the one doing a lot of the work. And the good news is like Price Labs is $20 per listing. It's like nothing. Hospitable is $18 to start off, and then $8 per listing after that. So these technologies are really low cost. It's mainly the people that can start to add up, and that's why we like the virtual assistant route.
Yeah. I saw a company the other day that came across my radar. You've got, and maybe this is kind of like what they do, like Evolve.
Yeah.
Have you heard of like Evolve? Like what's that model? Is it a similar model?
Yeah. So Evolve is going to promote themselves as managers, but what they really are is just glorified marketing. I guess just to give you an understanding of the difference is that Evolve can create a great experience, but they're not going to be doing any of the turnovers. They're not going to be hiring the team. They're not going to be contacting the cleaners to let them know when to go there. And that's half the battle. They're mainly going to promote the property, price it appropriately, how they see justified, set up all the automations. They're going to do that stuff for you, but they're going to take about 10%. And you're still going to have to manage the people and find the people.
Yeah, that's a hard part, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. So to me, if you're going to go that route, you might as well get a property manager, or the opposite way, you might as well learn this business and do it yourself.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. So you decided that this was working so well for you that you were going to open it up and start teaching other people to do this. Like, why go that route? Why do that? Right. I'm just curious.
The market requested it. I've got a podcast and YouTube channel, The Fearless Investor. It used to be called Fearless Flipping. That can just tell you how my business has evolved. Because when I first started, I was just like, oh, no one's going to want to learn about Airbnb. But I just started dabbling in like, oh, by the way, I've got this place that I Airbnb. And a lot of my audience was just like, hey, tell me more about that. And I was like, you want to learn about Airbnb? That's kind of strange. and then honestly, I started a Facebook group called Airbnb Masterminds, and just kind of made it as a place to learn what do people want to learn about Airbnb. And before I knew it, people were coming to me wanting to know if I had a course, wanting to know if I had a mastermind. And today, that Airbnb Masterminds page, still free, is the biggest group in the world for Airbnb hosts on Facebook. We have over 120,000 members in there.
Dude, that is ridiculous.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I have no rhyme or reason to why it grew so fast, but,
well, market, you said it, the market wanted it, right? Yeah. And especially with COVID hit, then everybody was like, okay, I need to go vacation somewhere that's not a hotel, that's close by. It exposed, man, great timing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And honestly, anytime I've ever done anything that's worth doing, the number one thing I always want to do is scream it to the world. I'm not good at keeping secrets. I want to tell everyone about what I'm doing. I want to be able to show people that they can do it too. And, after like one of my very first students today, they started with us about a year and a half ago. That's when I really kind of started ramping up the education side. They're at 16 units today, and year one, they grossed over $160,000. They netted, it was somewhere around like the 30 or 40% on their margins. Like, and this is a guy who's an engineer, and his business partner is a card dealer at a local casino. And they both have full-time jobs and able to do this. And I'm pretty confident that in year two, they are both on track to be able to quit their full-time jobs. And that's a fun feeling, when you know that you've been able to have an impact on someone's life and help them in that way. And now, one of my most recent students joined us 3 months ago, has 12 contracts on arbitrage and co-hosting. Signed them that quickly. He had a 6-figure business in month 1 gross, and now he has a 6-figure business in month 2 net. And that's, again, it's acceleration. It's an opportunity to be able to do something at a much faster pace. And when people are asking me, how to do it, I want to teach them.
Kyle, let me ask you, where could the wheels come off the bus on this thing? Like,
Great
like
question.
I'm sure as a business owner, you kind of say to yourself, hey, like, this is where the wheels can come off the bus, either for one of my students or myself and my business. Like, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing I did not realize is that even if you have, financial freedom, things are still going to keep you up at night. And these are some of the things that I think about too. Um, there's big metropolitan cities that are putting bans on Airbnb. Pittsburgh just came out with something recently. Atlanta tried to do it last year, and now, they're kind of talking about tightening things up again. Vegas and a lot of different places. And that's one of those things that's out of your control, right? That you can't really know if it's going to happen or not. However, there are places like Arizona that have, like, the state has actually passed a law saying that they are not, like, no city or no county is allowed to do any sort of like ban of these. They can only put on regulations, for example, a certain amount of people in the property or a certain amount of, space between the properties so that there's not too many in one neighborhood. There's things like that I think you'd want to look for. And especially in places that have a good, and I hate to make this thing political, but, in red states versus blue states, there's just a little bit more favoritism in the red states to things like this, to opportunities that you're going to be able to build a business where other people are owning the property and you're able to make money off of it, And so for that reason, those are some of the things I'm kind of looking at is, and even though Arizona just became a blue state as of this last election, predominantly they've been a red state, and that was part of why I had decided to expand over there as well.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's what comes to mind for me as regulate. I had a friend of mine that owned a bunch in Baltimore City, and then Baltimore imposed regulations, and it kind of killed that business for him. I mean, he still did phenomenal, but it was like, man, they moved his cheese pretty hardcore. He had a lot of them, right?
Yeah. And, that's where I also tell people, okay, we don't have an Airbnb business. We have a short-term rentals business. And so
corporate.
What's that?
You start thinking corporate, right? Like kind of like a corporate route.
Yeah. That's kind of the evolution of our business. Like we've kind of put a stop on growth right now because we want to refine, we want to make things better, we want to make things safer, and we also want to own our customer a little bit more. And everyone gets to that point in their business where they need to be able to say, okay, I need to stop relying on a third party thing to either define my failure or my success. And so these OTAs, these online travel agencies like Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, Expedia, these are all the places that you can list your place, but you have to rely on their marketing. So why not start to own your customer a little bit more? They come and have a great stay at your place. They want to come back again at a later date. Give them your direct booking website so that they can book directly with you and realize that they don't have to go through Airbnb. They can go through, www.whatever your website is.com. And that, we just got off of a mastermind call this morning with a colleague of mine who's been a coach in the space for a few years now too. And 80% of his bookings now are direct bookings. And if you can do that, now you've got a business that can sustain a lot of risk. And that's kind of our next step is we probably get about 5-10% direct bookings. I'd like to be more in that 60, 70, 80% range as well.
Yeah. Where my brain goes is almost creating an online lifestyle brand booking place, right?
Yeah.
Like almost like a VIP experience for past clients. So you convert them into a VIP experience with their own site and their own, like, I see that.
That's a good way of thinking about it. Now you got my head spinning.
Yeah, man, they become VIPs. And once they become VIPs, they get access to direct bookings, and there's something else additional, right? There's something that's there that, you definitely want to own that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, well, what question haven't I asked you that you think, we should know either about this business or your journey and or your coaching program?
Well, I mean, here's the thing is that our coaching program is very much for a specific type of person. You got to be wanting to make 6 figures in the next 12 months. If you're not there, we're not designing what you are going to want. If you're just wanting to learn how to manage your listing a little bit better, that's not what we're about. We want to take people from either 0 or 1 or 3 to 12, 15, 20 in the next 12 months. And that's what ours is designed around. And so for that reason, it's not a cheap entry plan, but just like how it only took me one deal in real estate to make my money back from that $30,000 with Fortune Builders, I designed it the same way. I want people to be able to make their money back with one deal. And we do that. But I would also say that the best place to start to see if you are serious about this business is actually on my website, absolutely free. fearlesskyle.com is the name of our website. And on the homepage there's a free masterclass. It's about 30 minutes long. It's going to teach you how to be able to get your first Airbnb without owning the property in the next 30 days. And honestly, if you go through that and you're on fire, then you're going to be getting an invite to be able to learn more about our coaching program. And if you're not on fire after that, then, maybe it's just going to be something that you want to go and buy a house and then hire a property management company to do it for you so that you can just maximize your revenue.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love that. I love that. You find out who's actually serious about that, who's serious about building a business.
Right? Yep.
Because this is a business. It sounds like it's a great business too, right? Your startup capital is pretty nominal, right? I mean, how many businesses are like that, right? It's just hustle and knowledge, right? A few bucks out of your own pocket, but not much, right?
No, not at all. I mean, that's the great thing too. I've never spent $1 on marketing in this business. Find a real estate business that you've spent $0 on marketing. I just don't know of many out there.
So far, I've proven to be the worst vacation rental host ever. So I'll give you my quick story.
Yeah, let's
hear it. When COVID happened, I always wanted to buy like a little river house. And the vision was buy a little river house. We'll stay at it. We'll Airbnb it. We'll do all that stuff. Right. So I found a killer house. Great deal. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. And we love it so much. We don't want to friggin' rent it to anybody. Right. My wife's like, I don't want to rent it. Right. So I'm like, okay. So we just got done buying our second one in the same area. It's not as cool as the first one. First one is super cool. But we're going through the process of renovating it. So we're spending all the acquisition cost, the renovation cost, the furniture cost. I mean, we're going to be into this thing for quite a bit of money, right?
Yeah.
At the end of it. But what I did was I'm allowing my team to be able to buy into the asset itself. It's my way to help my team learn how to invest, right? Nice. Now, that said, your way is probably a much better, more cost-effective, better return on investment way to do it. But we're going through this process right now, analyzing things through AirDNA, looking at comps, asking myself the question, very important question, I think. What would happen if we couldn't Airbnb this for whatever reason, right? What is the floor on this thing as a long-term rental? Yep. Could we pivot it to a corporate rental, right? Which is kind of the same thing. So, so far right now, I've just been spending a lot of money in my Airbnb journey and not seeing a return, but I'm having a lot of fun. So I'll report back soon enough.
And just like if you were to go and buy a flip, right? If the market flips on you while you're in the middle of renovations, can you refinance this thing and do it as a long-term rental? Can you, move into it yourself? You have multiple exit strategies that you're kind of taking yourself through. And the same thing happens for short-term rentals. If you're a savvy investor, I'd want to know, okay, what about a midterm rental? What about, just let's call it 3 to 6 months, students and government and maybe even insurance claims, okay, can it be successful? Yeah, it can. What about just as a furnished rental, 12 months furnished rental? If I can get $300 to $400 more than a regular rental, am I able to make more money? Okay, cool. That works out too. And then, just playing those scenarios out in your head, so that worst case scenario, at least I'm I mean, we don't want to just break even, right? That's not feeling like a
Yeah.
great investment, especially if we don't own the property. But if you do own the property, at the very least, breaking even.
Actually, now that I think about it, my first one was a condo in St. Pete, Florida that I bought 4 years ago, that it's been a furnished rental, and that's been great, right?
Nice.
But I never thought of it as a vacation, that, that there's the condo docs stipulate you can't do vacation rentals there, but it's been a
Got it.
long-term furnished rental and we've done well. Years ago, I owned a recruiting business, and when the dot-com implosion happened, we had to pivot. It was like nobody was hiring tech salespeople. And I remember I started looking at the industry a little bit, and traveling nurses,
Oh yeah.
were huge. I mean, that was like a thing. And I'm now, as you're talking, thinking, wow, you could literally be renting to traveling nurses, because that's still a thing. That's a big thing, right? All over the world. Right.
Oh, and that's honestly why I'm trying to find a 6, 8, 10 unit, little mini almost motel here in
Mm-hmm.
Fresno. The tough part is finding them in a good area. But if I can find one in a good area, or even say take a giant house and turn it into a 3, 4, 5 unit type of feel. There's so many traveling nurses coming to Fresno right now ever since COVID. And it's just like, I want to fill that need, because every single one of our little 1-bedroom, 1-baths that would typically, gross maybe $900 to $1,000 are grossing $2,000, $2,500 on Airbnb.
Wow. It's phenomenal, man. Hey, well, I appreciate you spending some time with our Grid family this afternoon, man. And I'm so excited that I learned a little bit more about your journey in this process, right? And like you said, we could probably talk and unpack a lot about what happened in those 9 years before you actually got into kind of like this space. But this was an education for me, and I appreciate you pouring into me and into our community. So thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, for sure, Rob. And like I said, if anyone wants to connect with me, fearlesskyle.com is my website. And then on Instagram at fearlesskyle, and just mention that you found out about me through Rob, and happy to talk.
Cool. And we'll make sure that we'll put all your social handles on here and send it out to everybody. And so, hey, man, I'll be calling you privately for some advice on how to kind of move this Airbnb forward. So thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob.